US futures edged down after Wall Street closed largely lower following a disappointing earnings from Microsoft. Asian markets tracking lower cues this morning from the overnight cues from US. The GIFT Nifty is indicating a lower start for the Indian market. Crude oil prices climbed 3% to a 5-month high on rising concerns that global supplies could be disrupted if US attacks Iran. Gold falls to near $5,400 an ounce as investors take profits after record highs. Silver prices too cool off from record levels. And US President Donald Trump to announce a new Fed chair tonight. The final four are believed to be the former Fed Governor Kevin Walsh. Then we have the National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett, current Fed Governor Christopher Waller, as well as a BlackRock Chief Investment Officer for Fixed Income Rick Ryder, who will be in the queue for Fed chair. Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageshwaran says that Indian rupee is not an outlier, adds that the weak net foreign inflows into equity markets is not related to tax policy alone. Also urges India Inc. to be ready to compete with the world. With key earnings, ITC meets estimates in Q3 FY26. Revenue rises nearly 6%. New labour code impact profits by 274 crores. And in numbers expected today, Bajaj Auto is likely to report a steady set of earnings, while Neste is expected to see a 10% rise in revenue. Hello, good morning. You've tuned into CNBC TV 18. I'm Vinny Motiwala and you're watching Power Breakfast with me. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. Now, in terms of cues that we've gotten from the US markets, a bit muted is what we're seeing. And look at the Asian markets, how they've opened up as well. A muted day of trade coming in for the Asian markets, most of them trading lower. Taiwan index is down almost 1.4 to 1.5%. Hang Seng is trading with cuts of almost 1% as well. Whether you look at it in terms of the Nikkei, that's the Japanese index, that's down 0.4%. ESX 200 is trading with cuts of around 0.1% as well. So keep an eye out on that. Even the Kospi, that's not managing to hold on to good gains in the trading session as well. Kospi too is trading quite muted. So overall, today the Asian market cues this morning are quite muted, and we have the Indian markets. What are we keeping an eye out on that? Nifty implied open, a 100-point down tick. So, gap down start is what we're watching out for. We had comments that came in from President Trump, and we'll take you through that through the later part of the show as well, in terms of the Fed chair as well. But nothing exciting in terms of cues for the Indian markets today. A 100-point down tick at least is what we're keeping an eye out on. But more in terms of details of how these overnight cues will impact our Indian markets, we have a team of research here to join us right now to set you up for trade. Important stocks to watch out for, important other cues as well. First up, let's go across to Gaurav, who's here to tell us the important market cues that we should keep an eye out on this morning. Good morning, Gaurav.
Well, good morning. If you look at market, yesterday we saw market actually rallied for the third consecutive day and it closed above 25,400 mark. So even going ahead, as per the option chain data, it suggests that 25,500 is a key resistant level, and at the same time, on the downside, 25,300 can act as a near-term support, and that zone 25,200 to 25,300 is a key thing to watch out for. But other than that, on the sectoral basis, we saw Nifty Metals and Nifty Energy were actually top gainers for the second consecutive day, and on the flip side, Nifty FMCG, now it continued its decline. For the second day, it was down almost by 0.9%, and we saw some of the stocks in the FMCG actually declining. On the other hand, if you look at stock specific action, yesterday we saw Hindustan Copper, GMDC, GE Vernova, ABB India. These stocks were actually top gainers, gaining more than 5 to 6% in the intraday sale at intraday itself. Now, going ahead today, the key event to watch out for is the earnings, and we've got companies like Bajaj Auto, Bank of Baroda, Jindal Steel, Dr. Lal PathLab and Nestle who will report their earnings along with the other companies. India-Arab foreign ministers meeting, that will also begin today. Remember, this is a two-day meeting, and given that geopolitical events are happening at such pace, this is a key thing to watch out for. Other than that, from the macro indicators point of view, we have got forex reserves data which will be coming in today. Fiscal deficit is something that we will be seeing for India, and for the banking segment, the entire system level deposit and loan growth data is something that we will be closely tracking on. Lastly, from the US market, let's also not forget about the PPI data that we'll be getting from there. Remember, if you look at the Qs and the global markets, we are seeing some kind of weakness. So it can happen that the Nifty can open with a gap down. But let's see and let's hope for a positive end for Nifty today.
Okay, we'll watch out for that, Gaurav. But let's go across to Sonal now, who's here to tell us which are the important stocks to watch out for in the trading session. Good morning, Sonal.
Good morning, Vinny. It's a long list, so let me take you through that quickly. For ITC, largely in set, but cigarette volume growth came in higher at 6.5%. But paper, agri-business growth was below expectations. But of course, all eyes will be on the excise duty hike from Feb 1st and any pricing action thereafter. For Swiggy, losses widened on a YY basis, but guidance maintained across parameters, so that stock remains on our radar. Dixon Tech, where the numbers are largely in line with estimates, Vivo PN3 approval is expected soon, and margins across business verticals were up anywhere between 10 to 130 basis points on a YY basis. For Tata Motors CV, the commercial vehicle segment, it was 10th straight quarter of double-digit margins for the business, and they say that demand is expected to strengthen further in quarter 4. For Vedanta, aluminium business led the earnings beat, and they say demerger process is expected to be completed by May 2026. Blue Star, it was a drag. Core business dragged, resulting in earnings miss this time. UCP revenue dropped 1% versus an expectation of 5% growth. For Dabur, it was largely in line with estimates. Domestic volume growth came in at 3% versus an expectation of 4 to 5%. Company said that rural demand continued to outperform the urban demand for 8th consecutive quarter. For Colgate, it was an expected miss this time around. Revenues were up just 2%, EBITDA declined 5%, and profits were absolutely flat on a YY basis. For Voltas, revenues fell by 1% versus an expectation of a 2% growth. So that was a miss. However, UCP revenue growth of 9% was positive. Margins in that segment fell because of negative operating leverage and deep discounting as per management commentary. Watch out for Aurobindo Pharma as well, non-earnings related news, because DGFT has now imposed minimum import price or MIP for Pen-G, 6-APA and amoxicillin. And remember, Auro is across the value chain in these three drugs. In fact, it is the only company with a Pen-G plant, and analysts now expect that this could add substantially to the EBITDA, around 600 to 700 crore rupees in FY27. So some positive news for Aurobindo Pharma.
Okay, Sonal, thank you so much for that. But in the final leg of update, let's go across to Mangalam, who's here to tell us the important cues in the world of F&O this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. So there was a solid recovery from lows that we saw in yesterday's session from both the Nifty as well as the Nifty Bank. In fact, it was led by the Nifty Bank. The mid-cap index too ended mildly in the green. We've been talking about this range of 25,150 to 25,450. And guess what? Yesterday, the market tested both ends of that range. The day's low was 25,159. The day's high, 25,458. Market breadth, however, would have left bulls wanting a little more because we had about 1,800 stocks which declined for about 1,200 which gained. The FII selling came back after a purchase of 400 crores. There was a selling of 400 crores yesterday, but nothing really to worry. It's a small amount. The other worrisome part, however, is the net selling by FIIs. 1,800 crore worth selling, where they added 11,800 short contracts. So in doing so, the FII longs are back down to 12%, with shorts at around 88%. And the net contracts at minus 1.85 lakh are higher than what we started the series with itself. So that's something ahead of the budget we need to monitor. But on the other side, what the FIs have done is they've hedged their positions by selling more puts than calls, telling you that at lower level, there is support, even though the FIIs are net short on the index futures. So if at all there is a recovery, there will be massive short covering that the street is working with. Where is the put writing visible? 25,400 and 25,200. All of that tells you between 25,150 to 25,250 is where support lies. But on the way up, 25,450 call writers are fairly active, telling you around 25,650 thereabouts, there could be some supply coming in. Were we to break that, then there is some punt buying ahead of the budget on the 26,000 call as well. The Nifty is fair and square above the 200-day moving average, so that's an important support on the way down. But on the way up, we need to cross the 50 and the 20-day moving averages. The two stocks I'll be tracking today, both Swiggy and Eternal. Swiggy reports its numbers for the first time after being included in F&O. And will its commentary have an impact on Eternal, which has seen an up move over the last couple of trading sessions after a big down move, is something that we'll be tracking very closely.
Okay, Mangalam, thank you so much for that. Important levels to keep an eye out on, and important couple of stocks that Mangalam mentioned as well. But let's move on. And the rupee actually hit a historic low, closing at 91.99 against the US dollar. Now, speaking on the currency fall, Chief Economic Advisor says that the rupee is not an outlier. Here is what he had to say when asked on the impact of tax ops on the rupee and FPI flows. Listen in.
let's talk about the fact that, as you point out in the survey, the fundamentals of the economy continue to be strong, yet we've seen a significant depreciation of the rupee. You still believe that the rupee is not an outlier if you look at a longer-term horizon as far as the currency is concerned. But in your words, when we talk about investor reluctance and you call for an examination of that, is there anything in specific, any specific friction, pain point that we can address today to ensure that we start to see capital flows? FPIs, for instance, will it make sense to address tax-related issues at this point in time, or do you believe that that won't really move the needle much?
No, whether it will move the needle or not is not exactly in our control. But I would agree with the first part of your statement. We need to do whatever is in our limit, is in our capability to be able to do, which is to offer predictability, continuity, and stability of policies, whether it is tax or non-tax. And also, in terms of, we are doing that in terms of improving our geographical market access. If you locate in India, where all you can sell. I think we are expanding our geographical footprints by concluding free trade agreements. So whatever you mentioned with respect to policies, tax or non-tax, offering that predictability and continuity is desirable in and of itself. Now, whether that will guarantee an outcome, that is not in our hands. And that has never been the case, because a lot of other considerations influence investors' behavior. But if we keep doing whatever is in our remit to do so, I'm sure investors will take note of that. And in comparison to other nations, we will come out looking better, and naturally money flows will follow.
Okay, on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. Up next, we'll get you the updates from the White House in a special segment. Trump, what? Stay tuned in. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now talking about the US markets, Wall Street ended mixed with S&P 500 finishing lower as Microsoft shares weighed on the broader market following its latest earnings report and after investors digested the Federal Reserve's interest rate decisions. The Nasdaq Composite fell 0.72% and the Dow ended marginally higher. We have CNBC's Peepa Stevens joining us to give us a wrap on what happened on Wall Street.
Stocks were mixed across the major U.S. indexes in Thursday trading as Microsoft and the software sector weighed down the broader markets. The Dow was up 56 points, the S&P fell 9 points, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq shedding 172. A big part of the decline in the Nasdaq Thursday was Microsoft and the software sector. First, Microsoft fell 12% after reporting cloud growth slowed last quarter and issuing softer guidance than expected on operating margins. Then, software stocks entered a bear market after the main iShares software sector ETF fell 21% from its recent high as investors show growing concern that AI could upend the business model for the industry. ServiceNow, which is often a bellwether for the sector, fell about 12%, even after the enterprise software giant topped expectations for the quarter and issued better than expected guidance. And American Airlines on Thursday said it plans to resume service from the U.S. to Venezuela for the first time since 2019. The change in policy comes just weeks after the capture of President Nicolas Maduro by U.S. forces. Other major airlines, including Delta and United, paused service in 2017 and have not yet commented on a return to the South American country. That's what's happening here in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
Thank you so much for that. Now getting you the latest on Trump-related developments and his commentary, starting with US President Donald Trump, who said that he will announce his nominee for the next Federal Reserve chair. On a Friday, Trump said that the Fed rate is too high, and he added his nominee will be the person that will do a good job. Moving on to his comments coming in on Venezuela, President Donald Trump said that he ordered a reopening of Venezuelan commercial airspace, underscoring the high degree of control that U.S. has asserted over the affairs of the South American country. Listen in.
We have the major oil companies going to Venezuela now, scouting it out and picking their locations, and they'll be bringing back tremendous wealth for Venezuela and for the United States, and the oil companies will do fine too. Venezuela will actually make for themselves more money than they've ever made before, and that's a good thing. And the people of Venezuela were literally in the streets waving American flags. They were so happy. And the people in our country, like in the Doral section of Miami, which is considered Little Venezuela, they're thrilled. And I just spoke to the president of Venezuela, informed her that we're going to be opening up all commercial airspace over Venezuela. American citizens will be very shortly able to go to Venezuela, and they'll be safe there. They'll be safe. It's under very strong control. And the people of formerly of Venezuela, some want to go back and some want to go back to visit, and they're going to be able to do that.
Now, moving on to some commentary on Russia-Ukraine front, President Trump said that he's asked Russian president not to target Ukrainian capital for a week as the region is experiencing fridge temperature. The call comes for a pause in attacks on Ukraine capital, comes as Russia has been pounding the country's critical infrastructure, leaving many around the country without heat in the dead of winter. More commentary from President Donald Trump, and he said that he also announced an executive order creating Great American Recovery Initiative to tackle drug addiction. Now, according to NBC, we have other reports coming in. The Democrats as well as the White House have actually struck a deal to avert a partial government shutdown and temporarily fund the Department of Homeland Security as they negotiate new restrictions for President Donald Trump's surge of immigration enforcement. Now, that's all we have on today's edition of Trump Watch. Thank you so much for that. We'll take a short break. We'll come back with more on the commodity front after the break. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now it's time to focus on commodities and what's happening there. We have Manisha Gupta who's joining us to give us the latest update this morning. Good morning, Manisha.
Morning, and thank you for that. I'll start with gold prices and what a volatile last 24 hours that we have seen in this one. Overall, it is 20% up in the month of January for 2026. And the latest report that came in from World Gold Council says that the gold demand in last year globally was of all-time highs ever at 5,000 tons. Last year, gold made all-time highs 53 times. And this year, we've already seen in the month of January, gold making all-time highs at least 15 times. Silver as well has been quite volatile. We've seen $120 an ounce on the higher side. It's trading at 114 right now. It did go down to 106 as well. And silver as well is up 62% in this year. The major gain, of course, came in for copper. That gained up by 10% overnight. It's hit a record of $14,500 a ton. This is the highest one-day gain since November 2008 that we've seen in copper. So almost everything that you see in metals, one is closing January on the higher side. And the way the markets are looking at waning confidence in U.S. assets, the speculative activity in commodities would just about continue.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. But we're going to wind down this edition of Power Breakfast. But quick heads up for our viewers. As India gears up for Budget 2026, the big question around growth priorities, reforms and road ahead takes the center stage. Budget Vision 2026, what India brings together top corporate leaders, economists and policy thinkers to share their views on what they expect in the upcoming budget announcement. Watch Budget Vision 2026 today, 10 a.m. onwards, only on CNBC TV 18.